Hey, welcome back. Today we are looking at Beowulf, and we are talking about the after party, the part that comes after Beowulf defeats Grendel, and everyone is celebrating, and the whole section here is full of fun and jubilance and excitement, with a constant sense of impending doom on everything. In so many ways, this sequence is so fun. There's so much embedded into the after fight. The celebration goes from about lines 870 to about 1250. And in this section, we have multiple significant moments of celebration, but each one is linked with a sense of disaster. There's a heavy sense of irony, dramatic irony throughout this whole section, where each thing that we celebrate is coupled with images of looming doom for our characters. Last time when we were talking about Grendel, we saw Grendel's expectations as he walked into the hall. Chickering calls those expectations his when, this sense of pride and hubris that the character experiences when he believes that his outcome is going to be positive, but cannot see the unexpected doom looming for him. And this is a key theme throughout Beowulf. Grendel didn't know that this was his final trip to Heorot, and that he would be defeated in this moment. And throughout this party sequence, we have several characters who are celebrating, but there is a lurking sense that this moment of joy and happiness and celebration is incredibly fleeting and could be crushed from any one of a number of directions at any time. And in fact, it will certainly be crushed very soon. And just as we saw with the building of Heorot, where we heard about the doom coming to Heorot, how it would eventually burn, and that was immediately followed by the doom of Grendel's, a completely unrelated doom. All of the lurking sense of doom throughout this sequence has really nothing to do with the next monster fight that Beowulf is going to experience. Rather, it's the more natural doom of the world of the Anglo-Saxons. Wyrd is everywhere. So let's unpack all the partying here. When we left off, we were talking about the SCOP, who was improvising and quickly composing a song to sing in praise of Beowulf during the celebration. And we noticed the mirror between his improvisation and the cadence of the heroes riding their horses. And so as we open this section, we see the song, we see the content of this song. Yes, it's about Beowulf, but the poet, the SCOP, links Beowulf to two other heroes. Both of these heroes are a particular Anglo-Saxon trope hero. They're a hero that follows certain patterns, the Rekka. A Rekka is an outcast, someone who has been thrown out of his country in exile, but then finds that opportunity for heroism and exploit, and that call to adventure raises him up and brings him fame and glory. Not all of the Rekkas ended well. In fact, one of the heroes in this story certainly has a very bad end. And we've seen Rekka before. Beowulf's own father, Ecgtheow, was a Rekka. He was exiled and cast out until Hrothgar helped him. And notice the similarity between the Rekka and Cain, and the descendants of Cain. They are the outcast. But instead of pursuing heroism, they pursue the destruction of good. And so they're monsters. The two Rekka talked about in this story are Sigmund and Heremod. This is one of the oldest references to the Sigmund story, which then becomes very famous in a couple of other cycles. The Volsunga saga and the NIBELUNGENLIED. Yeah, I practiced that a few times before I started this. The stories are very complicated. They involve a lot of really weird stuff, including someone biting a wolf's tongue out, a lot of murder, betrayal, incest even. It is complicated. But in the story, at least the versions that we're most familiar with, Sigmund has a son whose name is Siegfried, and Siegfried is the one who kills a dragon. There are some discrepancies in the version in Beowulf, but the version in Beowulf is a lot older. It's possible that the whole dragon slaying thing was originally associated with Sigmund, and then later came to be passed down to his son as the story grew and developed and changed. These stories are all retold in the operas of Wagner, the Ring Cycle, which is this crazy series of operas that's like 15 hours long. It's also where we get that general imagery of the opera of the large Viking woman singing. Das Rheingeld, Rheingeld! But in the Song of the SCOP within the story of Beowulf, he sings about the heroism of Sigmund, this outcast man who then fights a dragon and defeats it. He follows up that story with the story of Heremod. Heremod is a hero who goes bad. He loses his prowess and his strength, and he begins to turn on his own people, and he begins to exhibit all kinds of greediness, all of the counter character traits of a good leader in Anglo-Saxon culture. Beowulf is set up as a counterpoint to Heorot. He's a true hero. It's also interesting because the poet of Beowulf is creating another poet to tell another story within a poem. This is a poem within a poem. And although the poet in the story doesn't realize it, he's heavily foreshadowing something important coming down the path. Because Beowulf is ultimately going to also fight a dragon, and perhaps in an even more heroic way than Sigmund. There's even potentially a link between the treasure of the dragon Fafnir in the story of Sigmund and Siegfried, and the dragon's treasure that we're going to see at the end of Beowulf. And maybe the overall poet of Beowulf doesn't intend us to see the links between the treasures. Maybe that's just coincidence. How much the poet of Beowulf intends for us to read into this dragon episode in this poem within a poem, and how much he expects us to see the foreshadowing here is unclear. But the destruction that the dragon is going to wreak at the end of the book is maybe at least a little foreshadowed here. And either way, there are potential evils in both Heorot and in the dragon that may haunt Beowulf in the future. So although this is supposed to be a celebration of Beowulf and his triumph, there's also perhaps a hint of ominousness to it. But then the party really gets going, and Hrothgar arrives and has a speech here. Hrothgar looks up at the claw of Grendel, and he says, "First and foremost, let the Almighty Father be thanked for this sight. I suffered a long harrowing by Grendel, but the heavenly shepherd can work his wonders always and everywhere." Providence. That Beowulf's coming and rescue was a sign of providence. "Not long since, it seemed I would never be granted the slightest solace or relief from any of my burdens. The best of houses glittered and reeked and ran with blood. This one worry outweighed all others, a constant distress to counselors entrusted with defending the people's forts from assault by monsters and demons. But now a man, with the Lord's assistance, has accomplished something none of us could manage before now with all our efforts. Whoever she was who brought forth this flower of manhood, if she is still alive, that woman can say that in her labor the Lord of Ages bestowed a grace on her. So your mother's blessed because she's given birth to you. So now, Beowulf, I adopt you in my heart as a dear son. Nourish and maintain this new connection, you noblest of men. There'll be nothing you'll want for, no worldly goods that won't be yours. I have often honored smaller achievements, recognized warriors not nearly as worthy, lavished rewards on the less deserving. But you have made yourself immortal by your glorious action. May the God of Ages continue to keep and requite you well." So, Hrothgar says, I'm going to call you my honorary son. Now, there's going to be some repercussions about that in just a few minutes, because Hrothgar already has sons, and he already has heirs. How does it affect them for Beowulf to be called an honorary son? Beowulf tells the story with a kind of humility. He says, man, I sure wish I could have showed you the whole monster laid out, dead for you. But all I have to show for it is this arm. But he's dead. We got him. I couldn't stop him from slipping my hold. The Lord allowed it. My lock on him wasn't strong enough. He struggled fiercely and broke and ran. Yet he bought his freedom at a high price, for he left his hand and arm and shoulder to show he had been here, a cold comfort for having come among us. Now he won't be long for this world. He has done his worst, but the wound will end him. He is hasped and hooped and hurpling with pain, limping and looped in it. Like a man outlawed for wickedness, he must await the mighty judgment of God in majesty. Notice he gives credit to God for not allowing him to keep the whole body of Grendel there, that the rest of Grendel got away, but this is definitely a mortal wound. It will kill him. As everyone looks up at the claw, there's a brief comment on Unferth. Now, Unferth has had his boasting cooled. He's no longer trying to challenge Beowulf now that Beowulf has shown his incredible strength and power. Everyone is incredibly impressed at this terrifying claw. Even Unferth, who last time was mocking and making fun of Beowulf. Now he's been silenced and he's ready to believe in Beowulf as well. There's a quick rebuilding of the inside of the hall, because remember, everything was smashed and torn up in the fight. Everything has to be cleaned out and fixed up, and they spend the day doing that. And then we come to the end, time for the big party. And as they sit down to this party, it describes how many people are there, how everybody's celebrating, how fantastic this huge party is. But in the midst of this, as I mentioned, there's a sense of haunting doom. It mentions Hrothgar and his brother Hrothulf, those powerful kinsmen. Hrothgar and Hrothulf were in high spirits in the raftered hall. Inside Heorot, there was nothing but friendship. The shielding nation was not yet familiar with feud and betrayal. There are several slight references throughout the rest of this sequence to the character of Hrothulf, Hrothgar's brother. The two of them are sitting side by side through this party, and it keeps saying Hrothulf was still friends with Hrothgar. At this time, Hrothulf was still loyal to Hrothgar. What does that mean? Does that hint that at some future time, Hrothulf is going to betray Hrothgar? The hints become more and more explicit, and yet it never actually says he's going to betray them. But it does strike a very ominous note. Keep that in mind as we go forward. Hrothgar then presents Beowulf with all kinds of fantastic presents. He also gives rewards to all of Beowulf's men, who didn't really do anything, but, you know, they still deserve it for showing up. And he even pays a price for the man who was eaten by Grendel, in the vein of that Wyrd, recognizing his value. And at this point, there is another performance by the SCOP. He stands up and begins to sing a song that goes on for some time. And this song is a little bit hard for us as an audience because it makes a lot of references that the audience of Beowulf would have understood very readily, and we don't necessarily. We're helped along a little bit by a fragment of another poem that still exists. Most of the poem was destroyed, but we have one page of it. It's called the Finnsburg fragment, and it's about a battle between a subgroup of the Danes, the half-Danes, and a group of people called the Frisians. The story that the SCOP sings here is part of that story as well. And it's very complicated, but it deals with some key themes that might be important to understanding what's going on here. So there's this Danish princess whose name is Hildebert. And she was married to the Frisian king, Finn. It's an example of marrying into another clan to try to create peace between two clans. We see multiple examples of this in Beowulf. For instance, Hrothgar's sister was married to the Swedes, Onela. We're going to mention very soon Hrothgar's daughter, who's supposed to be married to the Heathobards. It's a way of stopping a blood feud. So if you've got a feud going on with this other clan, you can keep fighting to the death until everybody's dead, or you can potentially pay for the people you've already killed, or you can try to establish peace by marrying one of your daughters to one of their sons. And that seems to be sort of the pattern among the Danes. It's even possible that Hrothgar's wife, Wealhtheow, is a peace weaver, one of these women who is married from one clan to another. In any case, Hildebert is married to Finn. In any case, Hildebert's brother is Hnaef, and she also has a son. Now, the two groups, the Half-Danes and the Frisians, get together, and they are having some sort of celebration together. In this story, the Half-Danes have gone to visit Hildebert in Frisia. And then for some reason, not named in either of our texts, either Beowulf or in the Finnsburg fragment, the Frisians attacked the Danes. And there's this huge standoff where the Danes are defending themselves inside of this building, sort of a last stand, Alamo kind of thing. And there's lots of bloodshed and lots of violence. Hildebert's brother is killed, and so is her son. And Hildebert, who's caught between the Frisians and the Half-Danes, is heartbroken by all of this. Finally, both sides sort of fight themselves into a standoff, where there's enough casualties on both sides that both teams decide to make a peace. This time, winter is coming on, and the Half-Danes are not able to leave. So basically, they have to live together with the people who killed several of their family members, including their king, Hnaef, Hildebert's brother. His second in command is named Hengist, and Hengist is the one who sort of takes charge of what's left of the Half-Danes. And he and his men have to winter together under Finn. And there's a painful tension in this because he's lost his lord and several of his friends and family in this fight, and now he has to just kind of make peace with the people that have done this to him. And Finn tries to make things right by accepting the leftover Halfdanes into his own people and including them in the share of treasure. With oaths to Hengist, Finn swore openly, solemnly, that the battle survivors would be guaranteed honor and status. No infringement by word or deed, no provocation would be permitted. Their own ring-giver, after all, was dead and gone. They were leaderless, enforced allegiance to his murderer. So if any Frisians stirred up bad blood with insinuations or taunts about this, the blade of the sword would arbitrate it. So they have to make peace in order to survive together. And then we have this huge tragic funeral where they burn in a pyre all of their dead, and Hildebert is devastated and broken because her brother and her son were killed by her husband's men. And there, the Halfdanes spend their time with their friends' murderers all through the winter, and they feel disgruntled, and they feel unhappy, and they feel angry, especially Hengist, who is the leader here. And when spring comes again, it says, "Then winter was gone, earth's lap grew lovely, longing woke in the cooped-up exile for a voyage home, but more for vengeance, some way of bringing things to a head." So Hengist and maybe some other instigators lead a revolt against Finn and his men, even though that they have lived at peace all winter. They turn on them and murder Finn and take Hildebert and take her back home. It's a complicated story with multiple layers of betrayal to it. And Hildebert, the Peace Weaver, is caught in the middle of all of it. She's unable to save her brother and her son. She's unable to save her husband, and both sides destroy each other. And instead of bringing peace to both sides, she and all that she loves is ripped apart and destroyed. Just as the poem ends, all of a sudden the queen, Wealhtheow, stands up and goes to speak to Hrothgar. It feels very deliberate that we immediately shift our attention from this tragic poem that's supposed to entertain all the warriors here to the queen who is in the hall here. And Wealhtheow walks up to her husband to talk to him about telling Beowulf that Beowulf is his son. So when Hrothgar said, "You're my honorary son now," Wealhtheow did not like that very much. She likes to honor her guests, and she has shown great respect and honor for Beowulf in the past. But there is a serious concern about Beowulf thinking that he may have a potential chance to take over the Danish throne. Notice also that as she walks up to her husband, it deliberately focuses in on Unferth, a man who we hear again has killed his own family. There was the forthright Unferth, admired by all for his mind and courage, although under a cloud for killing his brothers, reclined near the king. At this point, Wealhtheow goes up to sit with her family, and it says, "And Wealhtheow came to sit in her gold crown between two good men, uncle and nephew, each one of whom still trusted the other." There's another reference to Hrothulf potentially no longer being trustworthy in the future. And notice how immediately after that it jumps to Unferth. "And the forthright Unferth, admired by all for his mind and courage, though under a cloud for killing his brothers, reclined near the king." So we jump to Hrothulf, who has the potential to betray them all in the future, and may very well be the doom on the royal family here. And also Unferth, who already has been the doom of his family, and may be implicated in Hrothulf's treachery somewhere in the future. It's unclear, but some people see a link between the two, including J.R.R. Tolkien. At this point, the queen speaks to Hrothgar, and she says, "Enjoy this drink, my most generous lord. Raise up your goblet. Entertain the Geats duly and gently. Discourse with them. Be open-handed, happy and fond. Relish their company. But recollect as well all of the boons that have been bestowed on you. The bright court of Heorot has been cleansed, and now the word is that you want to adopt this warrior as a son. So, while you may bask in your fortune, and then bequeath kingdom and nation to your kith and kin before your decease. I am certain of Hrothulf. He is noble and will use the young ones well. He will not let you down. Should you die before him, he will treat our children truly and fairly. He will honor, I am sure, our two sons, repay them in kind when he recollects all the good things we gave him once, the favor and respect he found in his childhood." So she turns to Hrothgar and says, "Make sure that you give the kingdom to our children. Don't give it to Beowulf. Make sure that, this whole honorary son thing is just an honorary thing. It's not a bequeathing the kingdom to him. Instead, I think we better trust in Hrothulf, which is this tragic idea, because we just heard this poem about this poor peace weaver woman who is ripped apart by blood feuds. And here's Wealhtheow, hoping that the future will be secure for her own children, that they won't be torn apart by infighting. And yet we have strong hints of doom for her children and for their future, and there's a sense of treachery lingering over all of this. Poor, tragic Wealhtheow. She turns then to her two sons who are sitting with Beowulf at this point. And again, she presents a cup to him, and also carries several gifts to him, including this gorgeous necklace. There was no hoard like it, since Hama snatched the Brosing's neck chain, and bore it away with its gems and settings to his shining fort, away from Eormenric's wiles and hatred, and thereby ensured his eternal reward. So this beautiful gold torque that she gives, this gold necklace that she gives to Beowulf, is linked to past stories, again, stories that the audience here would have recognized. And it's interesting because it seems like the poet here uses the material and accidentally, perhaps, blends two different stories. The Brosing neck chain mentioned here reminds us very much of the Brising neck chain, which is part of Norse mythology. So this may be one of those slips where the author doesn't recognize the supernatural and the gods being referenced. If you know the story of the Brising necklace, Freya, one of the most beautiful of the gods, goes through a great ordeal to get this necklace, and then Loki steals it and causes all kinds of trouble. Everybody loves Loki and his mischief, but that story is also overlaid with another story of stolen treasure here. In any case, this necklace looks like one of the greatest and most beautiful of all time. Notice how immediately after that, though, there is this flash forward. Hygelac, the Geat, grandson of Swerting, wore this neck ring on his last raid. At bay under his banner, he defended the booty, treasure he had won. Fate swept him away because of his proud need to provoke a feud with the Frisians. He fell beneath his shield, the same gem-crusted kingly gear he had worn when he had crossed the frothing wave-vat. So the dead king fell into Frankish hands. They took his breastmail, also his neck-torque. The Punier warriors plundered the slain. When the carnage ended, Geat corpses covered the field. Applause filled the hall. There's this dramatic shift as all of a sudden, here is Wealhtheow handing Beowulf this beautiful necklace. And in this moment, all of a sudden we cut and flash forward to Beowulf's beloved king, Hygelac, wearing it in battle and dying in a fight with the Frisians. The same Frisians who we just heard about in this poem. And so there's this sense that here's this beautiful gift being given in a moment of peace and happiness and celebration, but this same object, this same beautiful necklace is going to be involved in an event of death and destruction and cruelty and Geatish defeat. Beowulf's own people are going to be defeated in the moment when this gift is lost. And just as Beowulf receives the gift, there's an applause in the hall, but we cut straight from this pile of bodies of Beowulf's friends, and particularly his beloved King Hygelac, to Beowulf receiving this gift in the hall. Such a stark juxtaposition and contrast. And as Wealhtheow hands it to him, she wishes him fortune and blessing, and let the wearer of this be wonderfully blessed. We already know that Hygelac is going to be wearing it and is going to die horribly. And in this, she makes a plea with Beowulf. Take care of my sons, fight for my sons. I know my husband has asked you to be his honorary son, but I want you to defend their claim to kingship. Treat my sons with tender care, be strong and kind. Here each comrade is true to the other, loyal to Lord, loving in spirit. The Thanes have one purpose, the people are ready. Having drunk and pledged, the ranks do as I bid. This confidence that, please, let's hold everything together. Let's hold on to our peace. Let's hope for the future and for a peaceful transfer of power to these young boys. And we feel the sense of doom lurking behind all of this. Doom for Beowulf, doom for the Geats in the future wearing this necklace, doom for Wealhtheow and her children, doom, doom, doom. And speaking of all these future dooms that are lurking and coming to absolutely destroy these people, we shift now to the lurking doom of a monster coming back to wreak havoc on the hall. Men were drinking wine at the rare feast. How could they know fate? The grim shape of things to come, the threat looming over many thanes as night approached and King Hrothgar prepared to retire to his quarters. Retainers in great numbers were posted on guard, so often in the past. Benches were pushed back, bedding gear and bolsters spread across the floor, and one man lay down to his rest, already marked for death. At their heads they placed the polished timber battle shields, and on the bench above them each man's kit was kept to hand, a towering war helmet, webbed mail shirt, and great shafted spear. It was their habit, always and everywhere, to be ready for action, at home or in the camp, at whatever case and at whatever time the need arose, to rally round their lord. They were right people. So these people are prepared, they're ready, but it doesn't matter because doom is coming. Wyrd is always there, coming for you. Thanks for watching. You can click to subscribe or to watch another video, and I'll see you next time as we see what monster Beowulf is going to have to fight next. Bye-bye.